Welcome to Ntiva's webinar for September 2025. I'll be your host again, Ted Brown, Director of IT Architecture here at Ntiva, and today we're going to be talking about Microsoft 365 pricing updates. And if you think Microsoft licensing is just a maze of paperwork and numbers, think again. Behind the headlines of price hikes and new acronyms, it's a high-stakes game, one where strategic decisions can cost or save your business thousands of dollars. We have seen a dramatic shift in how organizations acquire, adapt, and pay for Microsoft tools that power their teams from downtown startups to global nonprofits. The rules have changed, and so has the playbook. Forget the dry policy updates. This story is a story of flexibility that is lost, and, however, new tactics gain, and an urgent need to outmaneuver cost traps as Microsoft redefines what it means to own a license. Whether you're a CFO, IT leader, or simply on the hook for your company's software budget, buckle up. The Microsoft licensing landscape is more dynamic and consequential than ever before. So let's go ahead and take a look at all these changes that have occurred so you're empowered with information to ensure you create an accurate budget prediction for 2026. And so, as I mentioned, we're going through some of the Microsoft 365 licensing pricing changes and things that have occurred over the last couple years here. We're going to do an NCE refresher. Now, if you're a commercial, pump business, you've probably gone through all the NCE, what it means to operate within it. However, this is now applying to nonprofits, so I want to make sure that everyone hears some of the changes so they're aware of what's going to occur. There are some other ones in here for NCE annual paid updates, monthly updates, enterprise agreements, price increases, teams unbundling, nonprofit updates, and of course, some recommendations at the end. So let's go ahead and start off here. So if those of you are not familiar, there's a new term called NCE. Now, under the previous cloud solution provider, CSP, the model, they had a legacy licensing. Organization had considerable flexibility where you can adjust seats counts or cancel subscriptions at any time with prorated billing. No extra cost at all. Now, this has dramatically shifted with Microsoft's rollout, what's called a new commerce experience, NCE for seat-based licensing, and this took place back in 2022. NCE is a new licensing platform that standardizes how cloud subscriptions are sold, managed in CSP program, but also introduces stricter policies that lock customers into long commitments in exchange for better pricing. So if you're not familiar with NCE, I'm going to cover this quickly. If you are, just bear with me. We'll get to all the important stuff after this, but I think it's a very important concepts to understand. So there's a couple things with NCE. Term commitments. Now, under legacy CSP, most subscriptions were effectively month to month by default. You paid monthly, you could cancel at any time. NCE introduces a term commitment, either annual or monthly at a premium price. In fact, subscriptions on NCE designed as a monthly term cost 20% more than the same license on an annual term. This premium was explicitly added to encourage people purchasing the annual commitments. Now, with this, you also have cancellation and seat reduction you need to be aware of. Previously, on the old platform, one could drop license or cancel subscription at will with a prorated refund for unused days. Now, with under NCE, if you commit to an annual term, you can cancel or reduce counts only within the first 7 days of starting or renewing subscription. After the grace period, you are locked in and billed for the full term, even if some users drop off or is no longer needed a license. In short, midterm cancellations are not permitted beyond that first 1 week window. Microsoft initially had a 72-hour window, but later extended to 7 days because of all the feedback. But still, a 7 day window is not much time to make sure that you license your company correctly if you're utilizing an annual license term. Now, they do have midterm additions. You can increase the number of seats, of course, that's allowed at any time underneath the NCE. So Microsoft's happy to get more money to add more licenses. But once you add those licenses, it raises up your minimum level. So you can't go below whatever you add it to an annual license. So you're going to make sure you're going to utilize that license for that full year or potentially look at utilizing a monthly license subscription, which you can actually remove at any time. And this gets down to the mixed term lengths. One saving grace of the NCE is that organizations can mix and match subscription terms to balance the cost and flexibility. You could put a stable business line of users on an annual subscription to get a lower monthly price and use the monthly term license for seasonal or unpredictable needs. Microsoft allows having both annual and monthly subscriptions for the same product within a tenant. For example, you could have a accounting firm of 25 people and they might buy 20 licenses of the annual term and they pay a month to month for five additional during tax seasons, avoiding an overcommitment year round for those five licenses. Now, Microsoft also has a payment schedule. With legacy CSP, monthly versus annual payment was not a big consideration because you could cancel at any time. NCE lets you pay annually upfront or monthly, even for an annual term commitment. Originally, annual term pricing was the same whether you paid upfront or in the monthly installments. However, which I'm going to get to later in this slide deck here, is Microsoft introduced in 2025, if you want to have an annual commitment billed monthly, it will have a 5% extra charge. So something to be aware of, and I'll get into that in probably two more slides here. So in practical terms, NC shifts more risk and planning burden onto the customer. If you over provision your licensing on an NCE, you're stuck paying with them until the term ends, whereas in the past you could remove them the next month. The immediate implication is that businesses must be careful to estimate their needs for the duration of the term. Microsoft's own guidance is for clients to wisely estimate the actual numbers of seats you'll need so you don't end up paying for seats you don't. Another effect on NCE's rigidity is how companies handle employee offboarding and onboardings. Under legacy, if an employee left, you could simply just not renew that license the following month. Under NCE, if the license is part of an annual term, you have already paid for it and obligated to pay for the remainder of the year. The best you can do is reassign the license to another user as a replacement. Many organizations have tightened their internal processes so whenever someone leaves, IT can immediately reallocate that license to another new hire or to a pool for contractors to ensure that every paid seat is utilized by somebody. It's a shift from just-in-time license management to an always occupied license management to avoid waste. On the positive side, a small positive, NCE structure brings a little bit of budget predictability. If you know you need X amount of license for the year, you can lock in the cost and budget it precisely so there's no surprises. In summary, the move to NCE is probably the biggest change to Microsoft licensing in terms of overall impact. Company must now be more strategic, decide the right mix of annual monthly licenses, and pay attention to the renewal dates. Remember, you have 7 days to make changes after renewal and keep close watch on licenses usage throughout the year since you can't shed existing licenses midterm. The era of set it and forget it with monthly subscriptions is over. It's now the era of plan ahead subscriptions. Now, as I mentioned previously 2 slides ago, NCE also made some changes to the monthly term subscriptions with 20% pricing per annual. Now, the additional tweak is starting in April 2025. Even if you commit annually but choose to be billed monthly, you'll be paying 5% more than if you paid upfront. In other words, Microsoft introduced a financing charge to spread the payments. For a $120 a year license, instead of $10 per month, it'll be $10.50 per month if you don't pay the 120 all at once. This change essentially affects all of Microsoft 365, Dynamics 365, Power Platform, and similarly per user subscription, regardless if you're commercial, nonprofit, or even government. While the 5% is not huge, it's another nudge from Microsoft. If you can afford it, pay annually. Otherwise, you'll pay a bit more. Organizations should take note in budgeting. If you are used to paying month to month for annual terms, common in CSP where partners often bill monthly on an annual subscription, you might see a slight uptick in costs at renewal unless you switch to annual paid all upfront billing. One strategy might be to align expenses and licenses to annual billing and only leave lower cost ones or in certain headcount licenses on monthly billing. Now, another change here that might not impact a lot of you, but I think it's very important to communicate here for those it might, is another change the CSP program has come down to Microsoft's encouraging direct relationships in some segments, making adjustments to who can have an enterprise agreement versus a CSP. In recent announcements, Microsoft signaled that some mid-sized companies up to 2,400 seats might no longer be eligible to renew their enterprise agreement and would nudge them to a CSP or the new commerce experience framework. For organizations, this blurs the line between enterprise and partner-led channels. It means that some customers who traditionally negotiated directly with Microsoft for the EAs might have to work with a CSP partner. This can impact pricing and the level of support you get. If your EA goes away, you want to ensure you have a strong relationship with a CSP partner. And on the topic of vendor relationships, it's worth noting that not all CSP resellers are created equal. Some offer more proactive support in optimizing your licensing, as well as keeping you informed about licensing changes. For instance, when Microsoft announced the 5% premium monthly to premium billing for the annual licenses, a good partner should inform you or perhaps make you aware of these changes coming up. Or if you're a nonprofit, a good partner should help ensure that you know which licenses are retiring this coming year. Now, after the 365 suite increases that took place in like 2023, for a while there weren't many other pricing changes. However, Microsoft did announce that Power BI, its business analytic platform, will get a price increase starting in 2025. Beginning April 1st, Power BI Pro will cost $14 per month, up from 10, and Power BI Premium will cost $24 per month, up from 20. That's a 40% premium increase for Pro and 20% for Premium. Microsoft pointed out this is the first price change since Power BI was launched in 2015, implying that the product has seen decades worth of improvements for free up until now to justify this price increase. So for organizations, if you're a heavy Power BI company, this could be a noticeable bump. For example, 100 Pro users would go from 1,000 to 1,400 for those license types. If you already have Microsoft 365 E5 or licenses that include Power BI Pro, Microsoft clarified there's no additional cost if you have it bundled in, so it won't impact a bundle licensing just if you purchase Power BI Pro or Premium separately. Now, similarly, Microsoft is upping the prices on Teams phone plans, the add-on that provides the phone system capabilities in Microsoft Teams. Teams Phone Standard, the base phone system without a calling plan, goes from $8 to $10, so it's a 25% increase. And the Teams phone calling plan bundles are increased too, going from $15 to $17. These also take effect July 2025. Microsoft is monetizing the fact that Teams have become a critical part of the stack and they're adding in AI features and other items to it. The takeaway is Microsoft is now reviewing pricing more regularly and making pricing changes. And 2005 will not be the exception as well into the futures. Organizations should keep an eye on announcements, typically from Microsoft, and they give about 6 months ahead of time. Then these license increases will take place upon the renewal of your license. So even if it's a July announcement that this is when the change takes place, if your Power BI Premium or Power BI Pro license doesn't have a renewal till December, in December is when the price increased, not when it was announced in July. Now, another fun topic here is in August of 2023, under pressure from EU regulators, Microsoft announced that the European Economic Area, it would unbundle Teams from Office 365, M365 E1, E3, and E5 and sell it separately. Then in 2024, Microsoft decided to apply a similar model globally to avoid complexity and potential other regulators stepping in. So starting in April 2024, Microsoft introduced 10 new no team SKUs, Office 365 E1, E3, E5 with no teams, and Microsoft 365 E3, E5 with no teams. And likewise, a no teams version of Frontlines and Small Business Suites. These prices of the suites without teams is roughly 225 to 250 less per month than the old suites with teams. For example, an Office 365 E3 is 23 with teams and $20.75 without. Microsoft also released a standalone Teams Enterprise SKU for about $5 per month. Crucially, for new customers or enterprise customers, the suites with Teams are in the sale. A new customer cannot buy an Office 365 E3 with Teams included. They have to buy an Office 365 E3 with no Teams and then add in the Teams Enterprise. Existing customers, the ones who already had one of the suites of Teams prior to 2024, can continue using it as normally. You can even add more licenses if you want. You're grandfathered in. Microsoft explicitly states that these licenses will not change. Clients with existing licenses that include Teams, they can keep renewing and increasing seats on these old bundles if you want. However, just make sure everyone's aware, if you have my Office 365 E3 that you're grandfathered in and you want to go to Office E365 E5, you can upgrade that license to get Teams. That's fine, but you have to stay in the same commitment term. So if it's a annual paid monthly, you have to upgrade to an annual paid monthly. If it's a monthly license, you have to upgrade it to a monthly license. If you want to change the commitment term, you'll no longer be grandfathered into that license SKU. So there's little caveats there. So recommend if you have any questions with that, reaching out to your account manager. If you're not an Ntiva client, reach out to the partner who's reselling your CSP licenses. They should be able to assist you and direct you in the best cost-effective way to maintain Teams if you choose to do so. And so, from a cost perspective, for the new Teams enterprise customers, the combined price of, say, Office 365 E3 with no Teams and Teams with Enterprise is about $26. It's a $3 extra charge from the old way of purchasing it with Teams. Microsoft indicated that about a $3 difference for enterprise plans would include Teams, and this would match the standalone price. So effectively, Microsoft built in a way to charge a bit more for new customers and gave existing customers a perk for legacy bundled pricing. Now, why does this matter? If you're an existing customer, you're safe unless you drop your license, your enterprise SKUs, and don't want to use it anymore. But if you're planning to move to an enterprise SKU, and that can come into an important place, say if you're a customer, a small business customer using one of the business premium or business basic, and you need to have more than 300 licenses, you have to go to an enterprise SKU. If you go to enterprise SKU, you need to keep in mind that there's now about a $3 price increase from the old way of utilizing enterprise licenses if you want to use Teams. Now, let's get into some of the nonprofit changes because some of these things are changing as well. The first announcement here is the Office 365 E1 nonprofit grant. It used to be free, it's no longer available. You can no longer get that for free. Also, the Microsoft 365 Business Premium donation, which give you 10 licenses for free, will also be phased out. This is starting in July of 2025. Now, nonprofits can still get deep discounted pricing, which is roughly 75% off the commercial rates. For example, business premium nonprofits about 550 compared to being 22 for commercial. Microsoft will also continue to offer up to 300 seats for the Microsoft 365 Business Basic for nonprofit, which is the small business edition of E1. So you still get that for free. However, you can only get it up to 300. So if you're a nonprofit above 300 users, I would expect that you no longer to get a free license for everyone on E1. You have to go to Business Basic, which gets you 300, and then add in a paid edition of E1 or beyond license if you need. Now, flexibility and risk. Let's see here. NCE lock-in removes some of that agility, unfortunately. Businesses that experience unexpected downturns, layoffs, project cancellation, may end up stuck with excessive licensing they cannot drop, effectively paying a tax for unused capacity until renewal. This shifts a kind of risk away from Microsoft and into the customer. Previously, Microsoft bore the risk of customers dropping out month to month. Now, customers bear the risk of over-provisioning. Companies might mitigate this by splitting purchases, perhaps renewing half their license in January and half in July, so not all are locked in at once, which is actually a great way to try to mitigate your risk. Providing 2 windows during the year to adjust your quantities, but doing so can be complicated as well as an overhead on administrative burden. Now, in IT operations, the team's unbundling for new customers also is a complicated procurement, 2 line items instead of one. It also has a side effect that if an organization somehow wants to cut costs by removing teams from some users, they can no longer do so by switching those users to a non-team SKU and saving a couple bucks. But those users do lose Teams functionality, which might hurt productivity or communication. It introduces a new decision point for IT. Do we need everyone to have teams? In most cases, I believe the answer is yes, but in some very distributed organizations, some users' roles might not need it. We have seen some organizations experiment with not deploying teams in certain populations, especially in industries where other tools like Slack and Zoom are already entrenched. Now, let's also take a look at the regular updates and right sizing. It's common for companies to find themselves to have more licensing than people these days, especially after a period of potential layoffs and hiring freezes. NCE makes it tricky to remove those immediately. but you should have at least identified them so you don't renew them. Implement a process that whenever an employee leaves, you mark their license for potential removal at the next renewal unless it gets re-signed. Tag licenses that have been unassigned for a while. And additionally, periodically check usage for product-specific licensing. How many of your Power BI users have actually logged into it recently and used it? Say if you have 200 Power BI licenses and only 150 people are actually utilizing it, maybe consider cutting 50 a renewal and putting those 25 to a monthly to allow a little flexibility there. So that way you're getting all the usage out of your license. And also recommend taking a look at a mix in term management. One practical tip is to use the ability to schedule seat changes at renewal. Some portals, like CP, have this feature. If you know how to contract with a 20 consultants will end in June and your renewal is in December, you can plan to reduce those licenses by 20 on the license renewal. Also, if your business has seasonal swing, like ramp up in Q4, maybe all your tax auditors have coming through for the beginning of the year, you might intentionally set a batch of licenses to renew right before the peak. So you can actually increase for the peak, and then you can have them right after the peak, minimizing the time that you have the licenses. It does require you to juggle two end dates and making sure you have an understanding of what that means. Now, in all cases, a fundamental strategy is staying informed and agile. Microsoft licensing is no longer a set it and forget it. It requires at least an annual, if not frequent, attention. By treating license management as an ongoing discipline, much like cloud costs in Azure, you can often offset many of these changes. For example, if Microsoft raises prices by 15%, you may find ways to reduce your license count by 10 through cleanup, so the net effect might only be a 5% increase. Finally, make sure to communicate these strategies internally. Often to execute them, you need buy-in from multiple stakeholders, finance for budgeting timing, department heads to decide if certain users can have features removed, procurement for negotiation, and IT operations for executing the change. It's simply a cross-functional team or at least an advisory process for major renewals to ensure all angles are considered. Now, in conclusion, Microsoft licensing landscape will continue to evolve. For instance, the wave of AI, Microsoft 365 Copilot, is bringing an entirely new $30 license to consideration, and they have annual and monthly commitments you need to understand. Staying adaptable and informed is crucial. The good news is that with the right approach, you can turn what might seem like a Microsoft attempt to extract money from you into an opportunity to optimize and maybe save money by eliminating inefficiencies. In conclusions, yes, there's been a lot of change with Microsoft licensing, more commitment, higher prices, new product segments, but by taking charge of your license strategy, auditing usage, optimizing purchases, keeping a strong line of communications with your partner, and planning ahead, you can ensure your organization isn't caught off guard by overspending. In fact, you might find that you can do more with Microsoft ecosystem, leveraging the new features that come with the changes without significantly overshooting your budget. License isn't the most glamorous part of IT, but in today's cloud subscription world is a significant lever for cost management. With insights and strategies outlined in this webinar, you'll be better equipped to manage and leverage your in turn Microsoft changes to your advantage. Well, that's all I have for you today. Thank you very much. I hope you learned something about Microsoft licensing and understand the impacts that are being released and coming up in the near future. And I hope you all have a great day. Thank you so much. Bye.